The wind screamed like it had a grudge. It tore down from the Wind River peaks, flinging snow across the stage station like fists burying every trace of the world beneath white. Tayanita Washaki huddled on the frozen bench, her knees pulled up, arms wrapped around her chest. Her mother's carved bone flute was clenched tight in her mittened hands, but it had long since gone silent, just like everything else. She had counted the coins in her coat pocket 12 times. Still 43 cents. Still not enough. The stage agent had laughed when she'd shown him the folded note. Prepaid fare, it said, signed by her Uncle Victor. She'd handed it to the man with trembling fingers, frost already creeping along the edge of her sleeves. He'd looked at it like it was toilet paper. "Ain't nothing prepaid out here, girl. You got no ticket and no ride." But my uncle said, "Then your uncle lied." She tried to protest, but the man had already turned away, muttering something about locking up before dark. "You got people coming for you?" he asked, squinting at her through snow-caked lashes. She nodded. She didn't know why she lied. Maybe because it was easier than the truth. "Then wait here. Ain't my problem if they don't show." He slammed the station door behind him, bolted it, and never looked back. That was hours ago. Tayanita could feel the cold gnawing at her now, slow and deep. It had passed the stage of stinging, slipped into something quieter, more dangerous. Her toes were numb, her fingers too stiff to bend. Even her thoughts moved sluggishly like water freezing midstream. The wind shoved against the station walls again, making them creak like old bones. The little lamp overhead had gone out before the snow buried the windows. Her breath formed no cloud now. It was too cold for that. She blinked at the darkness, tried to remember her mother's face, the lullaby and the flute's hollow tone, the way her father used to lift her with one arm and call her "my little storm." But those memories felt brittle like dried leaves. They cracked when she touched them. Uncle Victor had smiled when he put her on the stage in Lander, smiled with those empty eyes and said, "Do what you're told, Taya. St. Agnes will teach you to be useful." He'd shoved the bone flute into her bag at the last second, along with 43 cents in a handkerchief, and told her the fare was paid, someone would meet her. No one came. She wanted to cry, but tears would freeze. She pressed the flute tighter to her chest and whispered into the dark, "Mama didn't lie. Papa didn't lie." Her voice cracked and vanished in the wind. "I won't die. Not yet." A sound rose beneath the howling, low, rhythmic. Hoofbeats, steady, measured, growing louder. She blinked hard, afraid it was another trick of the cold. Then a voice broke through the night, rough, close. "Hello, anybody in there?" She tried to answer, but her mouth wouldn't open right. Her tongue felt too big, too frozen. She wanted to move, scream something. All she managed was a twitch of her fingers. "I saw the broken window. I know someone's in there." The voice paused. "I ain't gonna hurt you. Just checking the station. Storm's bad tonight." The door rattled. "Locked. Damn fool," the voice muttered. Locked it and left. Another pause. "All right then. I'm coming in through the window. Don't be scared." She heard boots crunching through ice. A grunt. Then the glass scraped and cracked, followed by the shuffle of a body squeezing through. Light bloomed suddenly, a lantern. Yellow, warm, impossible. Tayanita squinted. The man holding it was big. Broad shoulders, coat crusted with snow, gray hair curling under a battered hat. His face looked carved from the same stone as the mountains. Harsh, weathered. But when his eyes found her, something broke in them. "Jesus," he breathed. He dropped to his knees, set the lantern beside her. "Little one, can you hear me?" She tried to nod. Maybe she did. maybe not. How long you been in here? His hand hovered near her cheek, stopped. Never mind that. You're ice. He pulled off his gloves, pressed 2 fingers against her neck. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he shrugged out of his massive sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her. Pain knifed through her. She gasped. It felt like being stung by fire ants from the inside. I know. His voice was steady. That's good. Means you can still feel. He reached for her hands. She flinched. The flute clattered to the floor. He froze. His gaze dropped to it, then snapped back to her face. Where did you get that? She worked her jaw. It took effort. My mama's. His face twisted. Something she didn't understand passed through it, shock, sorrow, memory. What's your name, child? Tayanita. Tayanita Washaki. He made a sound, low, rough, like something cracked open in his chest. He sat back on his heels, looked at her like she was the only thing in the world. Washaki, he repeated. Wanatun's girl. I'll be damned. He wasn't asking. You knew my papa. Her voice was barely there. He nodded slowly. Your father was my brother in all but blood. We built Rimrock Ranch together. He was my best friend. Tayanita blinked. She remembered whispers of a ranch in her father's stories. Rimrock, the wild hills, the cattle. She'd thought it was a dream. He said you were dead, she said. Uncle Victor said. The ranch burned in a storm. The man's face turned to stone. Victor Washaki is a lying bastard. He stood towering and looked around the room like he wanted to punch the wind itself. You able to walk? She tried. Her legs gave out. He caught her mid-fall, lifted her like she weighed nothing. Then I carry you. He grabbed the flute from the ground and tucked it into her hands. Hold on tight. As they reached the door, she stirred weakly. Why? Were you out here? His voice was quiet this time. I check the station every time a storm rolls through, ever since your daddy died in one. I was too late then. Not again. Outside, the storm had eased just enough. Snow swirled thick and heavy. The man's horse waited nearby, tall and silent breath fogging the air. He swung her up, climbed behind her, and wrapped his arms around her small form. The coat still smelled of smoke and pine. There's warmth ahead. My sister's cooking stew. You'll be all right. Tayanita leaned back against his chest, eyes closing. The pain throbbed in her fingers, toes, ribs. But under it something deeper was stirring. Not just warmth, hope. You're Wanatun's girl. God's help us both. The words echoed in Silas Red Elk's chest as he rode, one hand gripping the reins, the other steadying the bundle of fur and child wrapped in his sheepskin coat. The storm hadn't let up, not really. Snow still fell sideways, stinging like grit, but the worst of it had passed. He could see the path ahead now, or at least where it ought to be. His stallion Smoke knew the way. That horse had carried him through worse. Tayanita didn't make a sound. He checked again, leaning close to feel her breath on his neck. Faint, but still there. Stay with me, he muttered, his voice lost to the wind. The ride from the old stage station to Rimrock Ranch usually took 20 minutes. Tonight it took nearly an hour. Twice he had to dismount and clear branches that had fallen across the path. Once Smoke stumbled in a drift, nearly throwing them both. But Silas never let go. He had let go once years ago of a friend, a brother in all but blood. He hadn't known Wanatun had a daughter. Hadn't known there was still something of him left walking this earth. The porch light at Rimrock burned like a beacon flickering through the white curtain of snow. As he reached the yard, the front door flew open. Mina stood in the frame shawl, pulled tight hair in a thick braid down her back. "Silas," she called, squinting into the dark. "I've got a girl," he shouted back. "Get blankets. Water. She's half froze." Mina moved fast, disappearing inside. By the time Silas reached the porch, she was back with arms full of quilts. Benny Martinez, their ranch hand, came running from the bunkhouse, pulling on his coat as he moved. Silas slid off smoke and lifted the girl down with a grunt. "Easy now," he whispered. "We're home." The house was warm. It smelled of cedar smoke and stew, and the air hit like fire on his face after the cold. Mina cleared the hearth, threw down furs, and knelt beside them as Silas laid the girl down gently. Her skin was like ice, her lips blue. "Heat. Slow," Mina said, voice calm but urgent. "Too fast and she'll go into shock." She stripped the wet layers from Tianita's limbs, swaddled her in dry quilts, and began rubbing salve into her hands and feet. Silas built the fire higher, then crouched beside them, breath still heaving from the ride. "She's Wanaton's," he said. Mina's hands paused. "You're sure?" She said. "Her name's Tianita Washaki. Looked just like him, Mina. And she had this." He held out the carved bone flute. Mina stared at it for a long beat, then reached for it gently. "I made this with him," she murmured. "Back when we thought carving would save our spirits." "Uncle left her at the station," Silas said. "No fare. Nothing but this flute and 43 cents. Mina's face went hard. "That bastard." "I didn't know she existed," Silas said low. "I didn't know he had a daughter. She's alive now. That's what matters." Tianita stirred, then a soft sound escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and afraid. "You're safe," Mina said quickly. "No one's gonna hurt you here." The girl blinked slowly, then looked at Silas. Her voice was a whisper. "You knew my papa." "I did." "You ain't dead." "No," he said gently. "And you're not either. You made it." Her eyes slid closed again. "She'll sleep now," Mina said, adjusting the blanket. "Body needs it." Silas stood backing away a step. His hands trembled, not from the cold anymore. He walked to the window, stared out at the snow. Guilt twisted in his gut. "She should have been here all along," he said. "With us. With family. Don't blame yourself. I should have checked on Victor after Wanaton died. Should have gone looking. I thought the past was buried." Mina came to stand beside him, folding her arms. "The past don't stay buried unless it wants to. You of all people should know that." Silas nodded. Outside, the storm howled less now, like it had tired itself out. Benny returned from the barn, stomping snow off his boots. "Horses are fed." "You all right, boss?" Silas nodded. "Thanks, Benny." Benny glanced toward the girl by the fire. "Who is she, family?" Mina answered. "And that's all you need to know." He gave a slow nod and tipped his hat. "I'll keep watch tonight." Silas returned to the hearth after Benny left. He crouched, staring into the flames, trying to quiet the storm still raging inside him. "Victor's got no business raising that girl," he said. "No, he doesn't." Mina agreed. "She's got bruises. Old ones." And she flinched when I reached for her hands. Mina's eyes darkened. "I want to know what he's done. All of it. I'll find out." Mina said, "Tomorrow. I'll go through her things. Maybe there's something in that bag he sent her with." Silas nodded slowly. He looked at the girl again, so small in the quilt, her face slack with sleep, but still troubled like even her dreams weren't safe. She's got her father's eyes, and his bad luck, Mina muttered. But not anymore. The fire cracked and silence fell for a while, warm and close. I'm going to the tribal court, Silas said finally. In Red Hawk. First light. To do what? To get custody. Mina arched a brow. You think it'll be that easy, what? Easy, he said. But right. Mina studied him. Then she nodded once. She's got a fire in her. I can feel it. So did her father. Silas leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, the heat of the fire soaking into him. His ribs ached. His shoulder was stiff. He hadn't felt this old in a long time. But the ache was good. It reminded him he was still breathing, still fighting. We'll keep her safe, he said. Of course we will. And if Victor tries anything... Mina didn't let him finish. He won't get close. Tyanita shifted again, murmured something. Silas moved closer, knelt by her side. I'm here, little storm, he whispered. You don't have to be alone anymore. She didn't wake, but her hand tightened around the flute. And for the first time in many winters, the fire inside Rimrock burned like it used to, steady, strong, and ready for the storm still coming. He sold the ranch, but he didn't sell his daughter's future. The snow had stopped by morning. Blue sky stretched wide over Rimrock, a hard, cold kind of blue that made the frost sparkle like broken glass. Chickens clucked in the yard. Smoke rose in steady curls from the chimney. Inside, the world was still quiet, like the house was holding its breath. Tyanita slept deep in the small bedroom off the kitchen, curled under quilts too heavy for her small frame. Mina stood by the window with a steaming mug in her hands, watching the sun creep across the frost-slicked fence rails. Her fingers were raw from rubbing salve into the girl's blistered hands and feet. Her jaw was set. Behind her, Silas paced. The fire snapped behind him, but he barely noticed. She should be warm by now, he said. She is, Mina answered. And she hasn't woken up, she will. He stopped, ran a hand down his face. I can't sit here, Mina. I need to do something. You're not the one who sat up half the night keeping her from losing a toe. He looked at her, then away. I know. Mina's tone softened. You want to help her? Then get the answers we need. Silas exhaled. Where's the bag she came with? Mina gestured toward the table where a worn satchel lay slouched beside a pot of cooling tea. He crossed to it, unbuckled the flap, and tipped out the contents. One dress threadbare and 2 sizes too small, a pair of socks that didn't match, a broken hairbrush, and a bundle of folded papers tied with rough twine. Silas sat down slowly, unknotted the string. He spread the papers across the table, eyes scanning the first page. His breath caught. What is it? Mina asked. He turned the document so she could see. It's from the Territorial Bank in Lander. Says Wanatan sold his half of Rimrock before he died. To who? To me. Silas said quietly. It's our old agreement. He signed over his half, said he wanted Tyanita to have the money. $15,000, held in trust. Mina dropped into the chair across from him. Victor knew. He had to. He was at the funeral. Silas picked up the next sheet. A notarized letter. Wanatan named me as guardian if anything happened. It's all here. He made it legal. Mina stared at the paper. So why didn't we know about her? Silas's voice dropped. Victor lied. Said there were no heirs. Claimed Wanatan had no children. Mina's mouth tightened. and the court in Cheyenne gave him custody. He's been controlling that trust ever since. He can't touch the principal unless he proves hardship, Silas said, or unless she dies. They stared at each other. Mina's voice was like flint. He left her to freeze for $15,000. Silas stood abruptly paced to the hearth and back. He almost got away with it. But he didn't. Mina said, "You found her. She's here now. She shouldn't have needed finding." Mina tapped the papers. "This changes everything. I'm going to Red Hawk tomorrow. File for guardianship with Judge Tall Bear. You think Victor's gonna let that happen without a fight?" Silas looked at her. "I'm counting on it." A sound came from the bedroom, a faint cough. They both turned. Mina rose and slipped inside. A moment later, she reappeared, eyes softer. "She's waking up." Silas followed her in. Tianita blinked at the ceiling, eyes sluggish but aware. Her cheeks were flushed and her hair clung to her face with sweat. "You're burning up a little," Mina said, kneeling by the bed. "That's the cold leaving your bones." Tianita turned her head slowly. Her eyes found Silas. "You're still here," she rasped. "I said I would be." A shadow passed over her face. "He said someone would meet me." "I waited." "I know," Silas said, "but it wasn't your fault." She didn't answer. Silas crouched beside her. "I have to ask you something hard." Her eyes didn't move. "Did Victor ever hit you?" A pause, then a nod. Often another nod. Silas's throat tightened. He glanced at Mina, who gave a quiet nod of encouragement. "Do you remember what happened after your father died?" Tianita blinked. "Uncle said nobody wanted me. Said I cost too much. Sent me to Miss Agnes's for a while. Then took me back. Started drinking more, started hitting more." Silas felt heat rise in his chest. "Why now?" Mina asked gently. "Why put you on that coach?" he said. He was tired. Said St. Agnes would make me useful. That they'd keep me this time. "And the fare?" Silas asked. "He gave me a paper. Said it was paid." She hesitated. Said not to talk too much. Said to behave. Mina touched her hand. "You did nothing wrong." Tianita's eyes welled. "I thought he loved me." Silas took the flute from his pocket, laid it in her hands. "Your papa did. He made sure you'd be taken care of. Gave you a home even after he was gone. That money, it was never for Victor. It was for you." Her lip trembled. "Then why didn't I know?" "Because your uncle didn't want you to." Silas stood. "Rest. You're safe now." Tianita clutched the flute, eyes already closing again. Out in the kitchen, Benny was coming through the door with snow on his hat and mud on his boots. "You hear what's stirring in town?" he said, shrugging out of his coat. Silas shook his head. "What, Victor's in Cheyenne making noise? Talking to lawyers? Bragging about how he's gonna settle the matter." Silas's hands curled into fists. "He's moving fast. Real fast." Mina picked up the bank papers again. "So do we." Silas nodded. "Tomorrow I ride to Red Hawk." Mina looked at him. "And what about Tianita?" "She needs to know she belongs here." "She already does," Mina said. "She just doesn't believe it yet." Silas stared into the fire. The words of Wanaton came back to him from long ago over whiskey and cattle ledgers. "If anything happens to me, you take care of what's mine." He would. And if Victor Washaki wanted a fight, he was going to get one. "I made a promise to her father," and I'm not about to break it now. The courthouse in Red Hawk Crossing looked more like a schoolhouse than a seat of justice, wood-paneled crooked chimney, a battered sign hanging loose on one hinge. But inside it held the weight of law, the kind that still meant something around here. Silas Red Elk stepped through the front doors, hat in hand, coat heavy with trail dust. He hadn't slept much. Riding the hard snowpack from Rimrock through the early morning frost had numbed his fingers and stiffened his bad knee, but it had cleared his thoughts. He was here for her. He crossed the small lobby to the clerk's desk, where a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained sleeves looked up with mild surprise. "Silas," the man said, straightening. "Didn't expect to see you in town this early." "Trouble need to see Judge Tall Bear," Silas said. "Court's not in session." "I'm not here for session." The clerk hesitated, then nodded and disappeared through the back door. A minute later, the door opened again, and a low voice called out, "Send him in." Silas stepped through into the judge's chamber. It was a plain room, bookshelves, a desk cluttered with legal volumes, a worn rug that had seen too many boots. Judge Elijah Tall Bear sat behind the desk, silver hair braided tight, eyes sharp behind steel-rimmed glasses. "Silas," he said, setting down his pen. "What brings you in with snow on your shoulders?" Silas closed the door gently behind him. "I need to file for guardianship." The judge raised an eyebrow. "For who? Tyanita Washaki. She's 10. Wanaton's daughter." The silence that followed was heavy. "I wasn't aware Wanaton had a daughter," Tall Bear said finally. "Neither was I. Victor kept her hidden. He's had her all this time, and you're just finding this out now." Silas pulled the folded documents from his coat and laid them on the desk. He sent her off on the coach during the storm, told her someone would meet her. Nobody did. The judge frowned, unfolding the pages. His eyes scanned the bank trust statement, then the notarized guardianship clause. "This looks legitimate." "It is. She nearly died out there. And Victor, in Cheyenne, making trouble. He's got lawyers already sniffing around." Tall Bear sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You're saying Victor tried to get rid of her, to access the trust?" "I'm saying he left a child at an abandoned station in the middle of a blizzard with no money and no supervision. Whether it was murder or not, I'll let you decide. And she's with you now." "She is. At Rimrock. Is she safe as long as I'm breathing?" The judge was quiet a moment, then picked up his pen and began writing. "I can issue a temporary guardianship order. That'll hold off any immediate claim Victor tries to push through in territorial court." "Good. But it won't last. If he files in Cheyenne, they'll drag this into a hearing. He's her next of kin legally. You're a friend of her father. Blood will weigh more even with this paperwork." Silas's jaw tightened. "She's got bruises, Judge. Scars. I don't think she's eaten regular in months. He's no family to her." Tall Bear looked up. "Then build the case, find what you can. Witnesses, teachers, neighbors, show a pattern. The law needs more than anger, it needs proof. I'll find it." The judge finished writing and slid the signed paper across the desk. "This gives you custody for the next 60 days. If nothing stronger's on the table by then, it won't hold." "I won't need 60, Silas said, folding the order and slipping it into his coat. Tall Bear eyed him carefully. "Why are you doing this, Silas?" Silas paused at the door. "Because I made a promise to her father, and I'm not about to break it now." Outside, the wind had picked up again. Snow flurries danced like ash in the air. Silas mounted smoke and turned toward the road home, his thoughts already racing. He needed allies. Fast. Rimrock's yard was still when he returned except for Benny splitting wood near the corral. Mina met him at the porch. "She's awake," Mina said. "Hungry too." "Good." Mina studied his face. "How'd it go?" He handed her the folded order. "Temporary custody. We've got 60 days. She read it quickly, then looked up. "And after that, we fight." Tayanita was sitting at the kitchen table when he came in, small hands cupped around a bowl of broth. Her cheeks had more color today, and her hair was combed and braided neatly to one side. She looked up when he entered, eyes still cautious. "Did you ride far?" "I did," Silas said, taking off his coat and hanging it by the stove. "To Red Hawk Crossing." "Saw a judge." Her spoon paused. "Am I in trouble?" "No." "But your uncle might be." She didn't respond. Her lips tightened. Silas sat across from her. "Judge says you can stay here. Official-like. He gave me custody." "What does that mean?" "It means Victor can't take you back. Not without a fight." She lowered her eyes. "He'll come. He always does." "Then let him," Silas said. "We'll be ready." Tayanita looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and returned to her soup. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridges, a knock sounded at the door. Benny opened it to reveal a woman wrapped in a thick wool coat, snow in her braids and wind on her cheeks. "Clara." "2 moons," she said, holding out her hand to Silas. "Mina sent word you had a child here. I'm the teacher in town." Silas nodded. "Come in." She stepped inside and spotted Tayanita sitting by the hearth, the flute resting in her lap. Clara crouched beside her. "You like music," Tayanita shrugged. "That's a fine flute," Clara said. "Bone. My papa made it. Bet it sounds like the wind through pines. Maybe you'll show me sometime." Tayanita didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. Mina appeared with tea, setting the pot down gently. "Clara's here to help us build the case," she said to Silas. "Start with education," Clara said. "I can file testimony that she wasn't enrolled, that she arrived behind in literacy and speech for her age. That's neglect." Silas nodded. "Good. What else? Find someone who saw bruises, or heard him raise his voice. Anyone who noticed. I know a few folks who might talk." Clara looked at Tayanita again. "She's strong. That'll help." "She's her father's daughter," Silas said. Tayanita turned slightly, eyes flickering toward him. He gave her a small nod. Later, when the others had gone quiet, and Mina was clearing dishes, Tayanita spoke. "Do I get to learn things now? Like real school?" Silas leaned back in his chair. "You'll learn anything you want. Can I learn how to spell my name first thing tomorrow?" She gave a tired little smile and hugged the flute close. Silas watched the fire dance behind her. 60 days wasn't long. Not long at all. But it was a start. And this time they'd be ready. "The first thing I read was me." Tayanita traced her name on the paper with a careful finger. The letters still looked strange, foreign, like little buildings trying to hold their balance in the snow. But she knew them now. Knew that the long loop was a T, the double humps an M, and that strange circle was an O in Washakie. Her name was more than sound. It had shape now. It had weight. She looked up at Mina, who nodded once with that firm, quiet pride that didn't need praise to be felt. "I did it," Tayanita whispered. "You sure did," Mina said. "Now write it again. Let it live in your hands." Tayanita gripped the pencil tongue caught between her teeth as she carefully drew the letters again. She'd written it 5 times already, but each one felt like carving a path through deep snow, hard, slow, but forward. Out the window, frost clung to the edges of the glass, and the sun tried to stretch across the yard. Benny hammered fence boards in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney in thin, steady lines. Inside it was quiet, except for the scratch of pencil on paper and the soft bubbling of Mina's simmering corn stew. Tianita finished the final E, set the pencil down, and held the paper to her chest like a secret. "Good work," Mina said, rising. "You're starting to see yourself." Tianita tilted her head. "How do you mean?" "When you name something, when you spell it, read it, speak it, you make it real." Mina tapped the paper. "Victor tried to erase you. This puts you back on the page." Tianita's fingers tightened around the paper. Later that morning, Clara Two Moons arrived with her traveling satchel and a heavy stack of primers. She settled into the kitchen like she'd always belonged there, placing her glasses on the end of her nose and nodding at Mina with practiced ease. "Well, she's writing. Let's see how she reads," Clara said. Tianita stiffened. "It's all right," Clara said gently. "No tests. No grades. Just stories." Tianita nodded once. Clara slid a book across the table. It was small and frayed around the edges. Inside were short sentences about dogs and cats and a girl named May who had a doll. Tianita squinted at the first line, her lips moving. Mina poured tea in the background. Clara waited. "May has a red coat," Tianita whispered. Clara smiled. "Keep going. She runs fast. That's it. Again." The words rolled slowly off her tongue, like stones being pushed through mud, but each one hit the page and landed upright. And as she read, Tianita didn't notice her shoulders relax, or how her hands stopped trembling, or that her voice rose just enough to be heard. Clara looked at Silas, who stood by the doorway watching. "She's got a mind like dry soil," she said. "Just needs water and sunlight." "She'll have it," he said. By mid-afternoon, they took a break. Tianita helped Mina shell beans by the stove, her fingers moving slow and clumsy around the slippery pods. Still, she didn't complain. "You'll get the hang of it," Mina said. "Nothing grows perfect the first day." Tianita nodded. Then quietly, "Does learning make me safe?" Mina set down her bowl. "Learning makes you strong. Safe comes from the people who stand beside you, but strength that comes from you." Tianita didn't answer, but she kept working. That evening, Silas took the wagon into town to pick up supplies. Tianita watched from the porch as the wheels cut neat lines through the snow. When he disappeared down the ridge, the ranch felt too quiet. She went back inside and sat at the table with the primer. She didn't open it, just touched the cover. She wanted to read more, to see more than coats and cats. But something else gnawed at her. She turned to Mina. "Will people believe me?" Mina looked up from the fire. "About what?" "About Victor. What he did. What he said. Some will. Some won't." Tianita stared down at the table. "He used to say I was nothing, that no one would care if I disappeared." "Well," Mina said, rising from the hearth, "you're still here, and we care. So he's wrong, isn't he?" Tianita didn't smile, but something softened in her face. Outside, the wagon wheels returned long after dark. Silas came in with snow on his shoulders and a strange look on his face. Mina set the kettle on. "What happened? Town's talking," he said. "Victor's got folks spreading his story. Says I kidnapped Tianita, that I'm trying to steal the trust." Clara, who'd stayed to help prep lessons for the next few days, set her teacup down carefully. Who's he talking to? Merchants, traders, that fool at the feed store. Saw Monroe with him, too. Mina's mouth tightened. Victor's brought in a lawyer. Silas nodded. Edgar Monroe. Works with land developers. Cutthroat. Reputation, Clara asked. Bad enough. Real slick. Knows how to make truth sound like dirt. Clara sighed. It's starting. The smear campaign. Tyanita stood frozen near the doorway, her fingers curled at her sides. Silas saw her and crouched down. Hey. She didn't move. I don't care what they say. We're not backing down. What if they believe him? She asked. They won't. You said the law listens to blood. Silas exhaled. Sometimes it does. But this time it's going to listen to something louder. What's louder than blood? Truth, he said. And you. The wind shifted outside, brushing the windows with a soft howl. Clara stood. I can testify. Say she was never enrolled, never had records. That's neglect. Silas nodded. We'll need more. People who knew Victor, knew what he was like. Mina stepped forward. What about Jonas? Many horses. He and Wanatan used to work the range. He might know something. I'll ride out tomorrow, Silas said. Tyanita looked between them, her voice soft but steady. I want to help. You are helping, Silas said. No. I want to read more. Learn more. If I can speak well, maybe they'll hear me better. Silas felt something in his chest tighten. He nodded. Then we'll teach you everything we know. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Tyanita sat in the dark by the fire, her primer open in her lap. She whispered the words aloud, slow and steady. May has a red coat. She runs fast. She paused, looked at the sentence again. Then, in a quiet voice, she added something that wasn't on the page. And she doesn't disappear. I remember her screaming, and I remember him not caring. The wind picked up again that morning, tugging hard against the barn door and whistling low through the pine slats of the chicken coop, the kind of cold that seeped into wood and bone. But Silas was already saddled up and halfway down the trail before the sun had cleared the ridge. He rode with purpose, boots heavy in the stirrups, eyes on the road ahead. Jonas. Many horses hadn't lived near town in over a decade. After his wife passed, he took to the hills west of the boundary line, building a shack near the edge of the Bighorn foothills where no one bothered him. But if anyone knew the truth about Victor Washaki, it'd be him. Smoke trotted steady beneath him, navigating the rocky terrain with ease. Silas kept his mind on the rhythm of the horse, but the memories came anyway, Wanatan splitting firewood, laughing around the fire, Tyanita riding on her father's shoulders. All of it felt too far behind now. What was left was what Victor had done with the pieces. He found Jonas's cabin near midday, tucked between two spruce trees, half hidden by a leaning shed. Smoke snorted and stomped, and the old man emerged a few moments later, rifle in hand, and a blanket draped over his shoulders. Well now, Jonas said, squinting against the sun. Ain't you a ghost? Still breathing, Silas said, dismounting. I can see that. Jonas rested the rifle against the porch post. His hair had gone silver down the middle, but the rest was still coal black. His eyes were the same sharp as a knife. What brings you out here, Red Elk? Silas stepped up onto the porch. Tyanita. Jonas blinked. That girl still alive? She is. Barely. Jonas motioned to a bench. Then sit. This sounds like the kind of story that needs wood and stillness. Silas sat and explained everything, finding her in the storm, the trust, the bruises, the papers Wanatan left behind. Jonas didn't interrupt once. He just listened, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. I knew Victor was trouble, Jonas said finally, but I didn't know he'd turn monster. He didn't raise her. He used her, beat her, kept the money quiet. Jonas nodded slowly. I saw some of it. Before I left. Victor'd drag her through town like she was a mule. Never looked at her. Just pulled. You ever hear or see anything that might help us make a case? Jonas hesitated. Then he stood, disappeared into the cabin, and came back with a leather journal. He thumbed through the pages, then tapped one and handed it over. Last winter I came through town for supplies, he said. Stopped by the feed store. She was there, hiding behind a stack of burlap. Victor had just gone out back. I heard her crying. Silas read the entry, brief but clear. Girl hiding in the store again. Bruise on her cheek. Wouldn't speak. Clerk said Victor said she fell again. Doesn't add up. She looked scared to death, Jonas said. Didn't speak. But she saw me. Locked eyes. And I knew something wasn't right. Silas folded the page carefully. Can I have this? Jonas nodded. Take it. I kept it all these years for something. Maybe this is it. Silas stood. We're going to bring him down, Jonas. See that you do. And make sure she don't end up lost in the middle of it. I won't let that happen. Jonas looked at him a long moment. She's got her mama's eyes, you know. Silas stopped. You knew her mother not well, but enough to know she wasn't meant for Victor's kind of life. Neither is that girl. Back at Rimrock, Tyanita was sitting by the hearth with Clara practicing her letters again. She held the pencil better now. Her posture was straighter, but her eyes kept flicking to the door. He's been gone a while, she said. He'll be back, Clara replied. Tyanita pressed her lips together. What if Victor finds us before he does? He won't. Clara moved closer, voice low. I want to ask you something, Taya, but you don't have to answer unless you want to. The girl nodded. Do you remember the worst time something someone else might have seen? Tyanita stared at the fire for a long time. Then she said, barely above a whisper, it was the barn. Back in October. He was drunk. I broke a crate. I was trying to get the cat out. It got stuck. Clara waited. He had his belt off before I could say anything. Hit me across the back, then the shoulder. I couldn't walk right for days. Miss Darlene saw me limp into her kitchen when Victor sent me to fetch butter. Miss Darlene, Clara asked. From the church, Tyanita nodded. She asked what happened. I told her I tripped. She didn't believe me, but she didn't say anything. Clara reached out and gently squeezed her hand. You're brave for remembering. The front door opened then, and Silas came in, the wind curling behind him. He carried a paper-wrapped bundle and Jonas's journal under his coat. Tyanita stood. You came back. Always will, Silas said. He handed the journal to Clara. Jonas gave us this. Saw her with bruises. Logged it. Clara opened the page, scanned the entry, and nodded. That'll help. A lot. Silas turned to Tyanita. Jonas remembers your mama. Said she had your same eyes. Tyanita lowered hers. I don't remember her much. Just the way she used to sing when she made tea. Silas crouched beside her. She gave you more than a memory. She gave you her spirit. Tyanita looked at the journal. That means someone saw. That means it wasn't all just in here. She tapped her temple. No, it wasn't, Clara said. That night, Mina made a strong stew with smoked elk and cornbread on the side. They ate around the kitchen table, the wind howling outside again, the snow just beginning to fall. But the warmth in the house held steady. After dinner, Tyanita curled near the fire with the flute in her lap. She held it differently now, not like something lost, but like something earned. I remember her screaming, she said suddenly. Silas looked over. My mama. That last night. When Victor came. Papa was gone and she tried to stop him from taking me. I remember her scream, and I remember him not caring. She didn't cry, she just said it. Silas crossed the room, sat beside her, and stared into the flames with her. You don't have to carry that alone anymore, he said. I know. She lifted the flute, brought it to her lips, and blew. A soft note filled the room, thin, unsteady, but true. And in that moment, the silence finally broke. She's not the one who's lying. The first snowmelt had started to soften the hard edges of Rimrock Ranch. Patches of brown earth peeked through the drifts along the south fence line. The wind no longer bit, just whispered. But something tighter than frost still hung in the air. Silas stood on the porch, arms folded, watching the rider approach from the east road. Even from a distance, he recognized the polished saddle, the crisp black overcoat, the practiced posture. Edgar Monroe wasn't a ranchman. He was all teeth and tailored threats. The lawyer dismounted like he expected applause. Dust brushed off his gloves with a flick of the wrist. Silas read elk. He called stepping through the gate like he owned it. Thought it was time we had ourselves a talk. Silas didn't move. You're not welcome here. Monroe smiled thinly. Then I'll make it quick. He pulled a folded envelope from his breast pocket and held it up. Victor Washaki is filing for full guardianship and revocation of your temporary custody. Court date set in Cheyenne. 48 hours. Silas's jaw tensed. You trying to scare me? Not at all. Just saving you the trouble of pretending this ends any other way. He walked a slow circle in the yard, eyeing the corral, the stacked firewood, the thin smoke drifting from the chimney. Nice place, Monroe said. Be a shame if it got swallowed up in legal fees. Silas stepped down from the porch. You done circling my home like a vulture. Monroe's smile didn't break. Victor's offering a compromise. You back off. Let the court handle the guardianship. In return, we don't drag your name through the mud. No accusations, no rumors, no questions about your own past, which, if I recall, hasn't always been spotless. Silas looked him dead in the eye. You think this is about pride? Monroe shrugged. I think it's about control, and Victor's got more of it. I've got something he doesn't. And what's that? Silas leaned in. The truth. Monroe didn't flinch, but his smile tightened. Truth don't carry weight when no one wants to hear it. Silas took the envelope, glanced at the papers inside, then folded them carefully. Then I guess we'll see who listens. Inside, Tyanita had been watching from the window. She hadn't meant to, she'd just gone to warm her hands and saw the man in black ride up. She knew lawyers by their boots. Victor used to polish his every Sunday before heading to town to check on business. When Silas came in, her voice was small. He's coming for me. He's trying to, Silas said. But that doesn't mean he'll win. He always wins. Not this time. Tianita stared at the floor. He'll say I'm lying. Mina stepped in from the kitchen, drying her hands. Then we make sure folks hear more than just his side. Clara arrived just after supper, coat half-buttoned, cheeks red from wind. She brought 2 names and a sworn statement from Miss Darlene. She remembers seeing the bruises, Clara said, handing over the paper. Didn't report them at the time, but she's ready to testify now. Silas took the paper, nodding. That's good. And I spoke with Thomas Ironwood, Clara added. Used to work carpentry jobs out near Victor's. Said he heard yelling through the walls. Said it wasn't the kind a man uses with children. Will he testify? He's willing. But nervous. I'll ride to town in the morning. Speak with him myself. Tianita sat by the fire again, holding the flute. She hadn't played it since that night. It sat in her lap like something waiting. I could speak, she said softly. Clara looked over. In court, Tianita nodded. If I say it out loud, maybe they'll believe me. Mina knelt beside her. They'll believe you because you're telling the truth. But what if I freeze, Woe? What if I forget? Silas crouched down. Then I'll be there. And Mina and Clara will remind you who you are. She looked at each of them. What if he lies better than I tell the truth? Clara's voice was steady. He's not the one who's been waking up in the dark, or learning to write his name, or facing down memories no child should carry. You are. That's the power. Tianita didn't reply. She looked down at the flute and ran her thumb along the carved ridge. That night, Silas sat alone at the table, rereading the papers. The court in Cheyenne was known to lean on procedure, and Victor's blood claim still gave him leverage. But with the testimony, the bruises, the trust papers, and most of all, the girl's courage, they had a shot. He looked up when Tianita padded into the room, her braid loose from sleep. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Me neither. She sat beside him, resting her arms on the table. Did you ever have to speak when you were scared all the time? What did you do? He thought for a moment. I thought about who I was speaking for. Tianita tilted her head. Sometimes when you speak the truth, you're not just speaking for yourself. You're speaking for every time someone stayed quiet, for every kid who couldn't get the words out, for everyone who got hurt and was told to hide it. Tianita's fingers curled slightly. I want to speak for her, she said. The me who didn't know better, who thought it was normal. You will, Silas said, and she'll be proud of you. The wind had died by morning, but the cold stayed sharp. Mina packed supplies for the journey. Clara gathered paperwork and made copies. Silas loaded the wagon while Benny brought the horses around. Tianita stood at the edge of the porch, watching the road stretch out ahead like a question. She didn't ask if they'd win. She didn't ask if Victor would be waiting. She just turned to Silas and said, Let's go, and they did. I've buried too many good men to stay quiet when a child's still breathing. The Cheyenne courthouse rose from the city center like a slab of stone justice, tall, cold, imposing. Its marble steps were slick with half-melted snow, and a row of horses stood tied out front, snorting steam into the morning air. Silas helped Tianita down from the wagon, her boots touching the stone with hesitant weight. She held his hand tight, but she didn't shake. Mina walked ahead, shoulders squared, her shawl drawn tight against the wind. Clara trailed behind, carrying the leather folder with statements and affidavits. Inside their case lay in fragile pages and fragile memory. All it needed was the truth to hold it upright. Inside the building was too warm, too loud, too full of shuffling boots and muttered voices. The scent of old wood and ink hung in the air like a curtain. They passed rows of benches where other cases waited: land disputes, cattle theft, a boy no older than Tayanita in shackles with a bruised cheek and downturned eyes. No one looked up. Justice moved forward with or without witness. Victor Washaki stood just outside the courtroom doors, in a fresh black coat, clean boots, and a condescending smirk. Edgar Monroe flanked him, adjusting his cuffs like they'd already won. "Well," Victor said, voice smooth, "didn't expect you to parade the child here like some kind of exhibit." Tayanita shrank half an inch behind Silas. "She has a name," Silas said. "You forgot that." Victor scoffed. "The court will decide what matters." "They will," Mina said, stepping beside Silas, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "And I pray they see what the rest of us already know." Clara opened the courtroom doors, and the group filed in. The judge, a tall, thick-shouldered woman named Hattie Prescott, sat behind the bench in a dark green robe. Her eyes were tired but clear, her mouth set in a way that told everyone this would not be a performance. "All rise," the clerk called. The room quieted. The trial began. It moved slowly at first, papers read aloud, objections exchanged like blades. Monroe tried to rattle Clara when she took the stand, twisting her words about hearsay and limited personal knowledge, but Clara held her ground. She referenced lesson plans, failed enrollment records, and her growing concern for Tayanita's development. Then came Miss Darlene, trembling but resolute. She described the limp, the fear, the bruises. Monroe objected. "No formal report was made, Your Honor. This is nothing but speculation." Judge Prescott narrowed her eyes. "Noted. But I'll hear the rest." Thomas Ironwood, the carpenter, was next. He shifted in his seat and wiped his palms against his pants, but when asked what he heard, his voice was clear. "Yellin'. Things breaking. I didn't want to get involved at the time, but I should have. I heard a child screaming once. That wasn't something you forget." When Monroe asked if he could prove it was Tayanita, Thomas didn't blink. "Wasn't any other child in that house, sir?" The judge nodded once and moved on. Victor took the stand with confidence, hands folded neatly, voice smooth and steady. He painted himself as the grieving uncle, the guardian who did his best. Claimed the coach mistake was the orphanage's fault. Claimed the bruises were from falls or roughhousing. "She's a dramatic child," he said with a slight laugh. "Always has been. She'd spin a tale if it got her out of chores." Monroe leaned in. "And you provided shelter, food, basic schooling?" Victor nodded solemnly. "To the best of my means. And how do you respond to the allegations of abuse?" He sighed. "It's not uncommon for troubled children to project. I never laid a hand on hers. She was willful, sure, but I was patient. Too patient, perhaps." Silas gripped the bench so tight his knuckles whitened. Then the clerk called the last witness. "Tayanita Washaki to the stand." The room fell into a hush. She walked slowly, her boots echoing too loud on the floorboards. Her dress was plain but clean, her braid neat, the flute resting safely in her coat pocket. She climbed into the witness chair, with help from the bailiff, legs dangling, hands folded in her lap. The judge leaned forward. "Do you understand what it means to tell the truth, Tayanita?" She nodded once. "It means you say what happened, even if it's scary." "Good. You may begin." Clara stood, her voice soft. "Tayanita, can you tell the court about your life with your uncle?" Tayanita looked at Victor. He smiled. She looked away. Her voice was small. "He told me I was too expensive, that nobody wanted a girl with a ghost for a father. He said he kept me as a favor." Clara nodded gently. Did he ever hurt you? Yes. How often? Whenever he drank. Or when I messed up. Or if I looked like my mama too much. Victor shifted in his chair. What kind of hurt? Tyanita didn't cry. She didn't stammer. She just answered. His belt. His boot. His words. Sometimes he wouldn't feed me. Sometimes he'd lock me outside with no coat. And the night he sent you away, he said I'd be someone else's burden now. That I wasn't his problem anymore. Monroe stood smug. Miss Washaki, have you ever told a lie? She turned her face toward him. Everyone has. Did you ever lie about being hurt? To get out of chores? To get attention? She met his gaze. No. I didn't need to lie. It happened. And why should we believe you now? Her voice didn't shake. Because I remember. I remember the sound of my mama screaming. I remember the cold on my toes when I waited in that station. I remember thinking I was going to die, and nobody would care. The room was silent. I'm not the one who's lying, she added. Judge Prescott's face was unreadable. She turned to Silas. Do you have anything to add? Silas rose. His voice was quiet, measured. I've buried too many good men to stay quiet when a child's still breathing. Her father made me promise. I intend to keep it. Prescott looked at the clerk. That's enough. I'll take the night to deliberate. Court is adjourned. They exited slowly. Victor looked rattled now, jaw tight, hands twitching. Monroe was already whispering plans in his ear. Outside, the air was cold again, the snow turning to ice underfoot. Silas turned to Tyanita. You did good. She nodded, clutching the flute. And though her breath trembled in the wind, her steps did not. She said, I was worth saving. Even before I believed it myself. The lamps in the courthouse glowed faint and amber as dusk fell over Cheyenne. The long windows reflected the fading light in streaks of rose and gray. Inside, silence stretched across the room like a held breath. Judge Prescott hadn't emerged since recessing for deliberation, and time moved thick like syrup in the cold. Tyanita sat between Mina and Clara on the bench outside the courtroom, hands clasped in her lap. She hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. Her eyes were locked on a patch of floor, counting knots in the wood to keep the worry from spreading too wide. Silas paced the hall. His boots left faint tracks of melted snow. Each time the door behind the bench creaked, his spine stiffened. She's taken too long, Benny muttered from a nearby bench. Longer than most. That could be good, Mina said, keeping her voice steady. Means she's thinking. Or means Monroe's got her tied up in paperwork, Benny grunted. Clara shot him a look. Tyanita didn't look up. She's deciding if I matter. You matter, Mina said softly. That part's not up for debate. Tyanita's lips tightened. Victor said people only pretend to care about kids like me, until it's inconvenient. Clara knelt so she was eye level with her. He told you a lie because it kept you quiet, made you small, but you're not small anymore. You stood up and made them listen. Tyanita blinked slowly. Do you think my mama would have been proud? Clara didn't answer right away. She just reached out and brushed the girl's hair behind her ear. She already was. She said you were worth saving, even before you believed it yourself. The door creaked again. This time the bailiff appeared, face unreadable. She's ready. The courtroom filled back in with quiet tension. Everyone moved slower, as if even breathing too hard might break the fragile space hanging in the air. The judge took her seat. She didn't look at either party, just read from the paper in her hands. In the matter of Tayanita Washaki she began, and the question of legal guardianship following the death of her father Wanaton Washaki, and in consideration of her physical and emotional welfare, this court has reached a decision. Victor sat upright. Monroe's pen stilled in his hand. The court finds the testimony of Mr. Reborn, Silas Red Elk, to be consistent, corroborated, and deeply credible. Additionally, the testimony provided by Miss Clara Two Moons, Miss Darlene Hart, and Mr. Thomas Ironwood offered clear and persuasive evidence of long-term neglect. She paused. No one moved. Most importantly, she continued, Miss Washaki herself demonstrated remarkable clarity and courage in recounting her experience. Her story did not waver. Her voice, however quiet, rang truer than any argument I heard in this courtroom. Victor's face had gone pale, a thin line of sweat across his upper lip. Therefore, this court hereby denies the petition filed by Mr. Victor Washaki for guardianship. Tayanita gasped. Full and permanent guardianship shall be granted to Mr. Silas Red Elk, effective immediately. The words landed like a church bell through silence. Then Mina exhaled. Clara reached for Tayanita's hand, squeezing it tight. The girl sat still, stunned. Her body didn't quite know how to believe it yet. Victor shot to his feet. Your Honor, I object, I judge. Prescott held up a hand. You are welcome to file an appeal with the territorial court. But in the eyes of this one, this matter is settled. She stood, robes swaying as she stepped down from the bench. Miss Washaki, she said gently, you're a brave young woman. This courtroom doesn't often hear the kind of truth you gave today. Thank you for that. Tayanita nodded slowly, too overwhelmed to speak. Outside, the cold no longer stung. It kissed the cheeks and flushed the face but didn't bite. The sky had darkened into deep blues and soft lilac clouds. A few stars already blinked above the city roofs. Benny clapped Silas on the back hard enough to make him grunt. You did it, Red Elk. Silas shook his head. She did. Tayanita stood on the top step of the courthouse, flute tucked under her arm like a promise. She looked down at the town, the wagons, the horses, the people coming and going, like nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. Mina stepped up beside her. You ready to go home? Tayanita looked up. Is it really mine now? My home. Silas joined them, eyes soft. It always was. They walked down the steps together. As they reached the wagon, Monroe approached, gloves tucked tight under his arm, voice smooth as ever. This isn't over, Red Elk. It is for her, Silas said. Victor hovered just behind Monroe, face hard as stone. You humiliated me, he said to Tayanita. In front of the whole damn court. She stared up at him steady. No, you did that to yourself. Victor's jaw twitched, but he didn't speak again. They rode out of Cheyenne with the moon climbing above them and the snow crunching under the wheels. Silence hung easy, warm, filled with breath and road, and the ache of long-held tension beginning to ease. Tayanita leaned against Mina in the wagon bed blanket tucked tight. The courthouse still echoed in her ears, but the fear was fading. In its place, something unfamiliar took root, freedom. Silas looked back once from the driver's seat. The stars were coming out in full now, crisp and countless. What are you thinking about? Mina asked quietly. Tayanita blinked. I want to write a letter to my mama. You should, Mina said. You've got things to tell her. Tayanita smiled just a little. Then she closed her eyes. and for the first time in years, she slept easy. My name's still mine. He can't take that. They reached Rimrock just after dawn. The snowmelt had begun in earnest, turning patches of the road to soft mud, and the fields to dull brown green. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the air held the faint scent of pine thawing earth and fresh coffee. Benny was already out at the fence line, hammering in a broken rail. He waved once as the wagon came over the rise. Tyanita sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her hair had unraveled during the ride, and the blanket around her shoulders still clung to her like a shell. "Smells like home," she murmured. "It is," Silas said. Clara helped her down from the wagon, careful of the slush near the steps. Mina was already unlocking the door, humming something low and steady under her breath. When they stepped inside, the warmth rushed out to meet them. The fire had been stoked by Benny earlier, and the kettle sang on the stove like it had missed them. Tyanita stood just inside the threshold and looked around as if expecting it to have changed. It hadn't. That was the magic. She went to the shelf and took out the primer Clara had given her months ago. She opened it to the first page, the story of May and her red coat, and read the first sentence out loud. May has a red coat. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. "She does," Clara said with a smile, "and now she's got a friend who can read her whole story." That afternoon, Tyanita wrote a letter. She sat by the window, the sunlight streaking in across the table, pencil in hand. Silas sat outside with Benny mending tack while Mina prepared dinner. It was quiet but full, like the silence after a storm. The letter was short, just a few lines. "Dear Mama, I didn't disappear. I remembered your song. They tried to take my name, but it's still mine. I hope that means I did okay. Love, Taya." She folded it carefully and tucked it in the music box that had belonged to her mother. The lid clicked shut, and she sat still for a moment, hand resting on the worn wood. Then she got up and went to find Mina. "Mama used to say names were like fire," she said. "They can light the way or burn you down." Mina nodded. "So keep yours burning." But the wind that came with nightfall carried trouble. Benny came in first, face pale beneath the soot. Smoke from the south. Big column. Silas stood. Could be a fire. No flame. But movement. Riders, maybe. Dust and smoke. Clara looked up from the stove. Riders at dusk rarely mean good news. They moved quickly, locking doors, checking rifles, preparing the lanterns. Tyanita stood by the front window, flute in her hand, watching the southern hills through the glass. "Is it him?" she asked. "Don't know yet," Silas said. "But I won't let anyone take you again." As the sky bruised purple and the first stars blinked through the shape of two riders broke across the ridge. They came slow, deliberate, without rush, but with purpose. Silas stepped onto the porch, rifle slung low but ready. Mina stood behind him with Tyanita Clara just inside the door. The riders approached, and even before they came into clear view, Silas knew the lead man's silhouette, broad-chested, familiar posture, smug, lean in the saddle. Victor. He rode a fresh horse, one too clean for any real travel. Behind him came a thinner man in a brown overcoat, another lawyer maybe, or some hired hand. Neither wore a badge. Victor stopped a few yards from the porch. His face was calm, but there was a gleam in his eyes that set Silas's teeth on edge. "Well now," he said, "you got your little victory. I figured I'd offer congratulations." "You came all this way to gloat?" Silas asked. "I came to remind you nothing lasts forever. The court may favor you now, but papers can be rewritten. Stories can be retold. You're not getting near her." Victor raised his hands mockingly. "Who said I was here for her?" He nodded toward the ranch behind them. Just admiring the place. Must be worth a fair bit these days. Thinking of buying up some land nearby. This is sovereign land, Mina snapped. You know that. Victor grinned. Laws bend, old woman. Just like people. You didn't bend me, Tyanita said from behind her. Victor turned slightly. Is that so? You broke things. But not me. He smirked. We'll see how long that lasts. You don't have money. You don't have protection. All you've got is stubbornness. I have my name, she said. Victor's face changed. Just slightly. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. He pulled at his reins. You keep telling yourself that, he muttered. The second man never spoke, just watched with glassy eyes as they turned their horses and rode back toward the ridge, disappearing into the dark, like they'd never been there. Inside, the fire cracked louder than usual. Silas poured tea for everyone, hands steady but silent. Tyanita sat at the table, the flute resting beside her again. He's going to try something, Clara said. Let him, Silas replied. We'll be ready. Tyanita picked up the flute and played a low, slow note. The kind of note that didn't fill the room so much as anchor it. Mina watched her voice quiet. He didn't take your name. Tyanita nodded. Because it wasn't his to take. Outside, the smoke drifted higher, but inside the fire was still theirs. When men can't win by law, they come with fire. The dogs barked just after midnight. Short, sharp warning barks, none of the usual yips or night howls. Silas sat up in bed before the sound even reached his ears fully. The wind had picked up again, rustling the edge of the roof, but this was different. Too quiet underneath, like something was holding its breath. By the time he'd pulled on his boots and coat, Clara was already in the hallway, lantern in hand, her hair down and eyes alert. You hear it too, she asked. I smell it. Smoke. Not from the chimney, not pine or hearthwood, but dry and bitter. Kerosene and scorched hay. Silas bolted out the back door and scanned the southern edge of the barn. Flames licked along the side of the hay shed, climbing fast. The light danced against the snow like wildfire on bone. He swore and ran toward it, yelling back toward the house. Benny, bucket line now. Benny stumbled out, half-dressed, grabbing a pail from the water trough. Clara raced to wake Mina, who was already ushering Tyanita from her room. From the yard, Silas caught the shadow of horses, 2 riders galloping off through the trees. No markings. Faces obscured. But the second one glanced back, and the moon hit him just enough to reveal a glint of something familiar, a silver-capped tooth. Silas didn't need to guess. Hired hands. Victor's. He turned back to the shed, grabbed a tarp from the side wall, and began beating at the flames with it. Benny arrived with the first bucket splashing water against the dry boards. Steam rose in angry hisses. Tyanita stood by the porch, shivering despite her coat, eyes wide as the fire roared. Mina wrapped an arm around her. Stay here. No matter what Mina said. I can help, you already have. Let the men put this out. The fire fought hard. It chewed through this back wall, but the main structure held thanks to the cold and the wet snow packed along its base. They smothered it by dawn hands, blistered arms, sore water frozen across their coats and boots. Silas leaned against the shed, catching his breath, watching the sun rise through a haze of smoke. Clara approached quietly. We need to report this. We know who did it, he muttered. But proving it's another story. Silas nodded grimly. When men can't win by law, they come with fire. Clara followed his gaze toward the ridge where the riders had disappeared. They won't stop. No, Silas agreed. But neither will we. Inside, Mina bandaged Benny's forearm burned from a falling beam, while Tianita brought in warm towels without being asked. She didn't cry, didn't tremble, just moved with a quiet steadiness that made Mina pause. "You all right, baby?" Tianita nodded. "I've seen worse. That doesn't mean you have to act like it didn't happen. I'm not." She looked toward the window. "I'm just tired of being scared." Mina smoothed her braid back. "Fear's just a tool. You use it or it uses you." That afternoon, the sheriff rode out from town. Sheriff Mullins was a broad man, weary in the face and slow in speech, but not unkind. He walked the perimeter with Silas, surveyed the damage, took a few notes. Barn torched. Riders unknown. No one caught. No real witnesses. He scratched behind his ear. "It's the same story I've written up a dozen times. You know who sent them. I've got my hunches. But Victor's got his papers in order. Alibi always neat. No direct tie to any of these strangers who keep showing up to stir trouble." Silas crossed his arms. "So that's it," Mullins sighed. "Off the record, keep your guard up. Folks like him don't back down clean. But legally, you got nothing I can use." Tianita watched them from the window again. When Mullins tipped his hat and rode off, she came to the door. "We need to make it stop." Silas met her eyes. "We will. I promise." That evening they rebuilt what they could. Benny replaced the worst of the scorched beams. Clara made a stew thick enough to feel like armor. Mina lit sage and cedar in the corners of the house, letting the smoke roll through each room like a blessing. At the dinner table, Tianita pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her handwriting was careful, every letter pressed down like it might vanish if she didn't make it real. "What's that?" Silas asked. "Something I want read in church." Clara raised a brow. "You want to speak?" Tianita shook her head. "Not me. But someone. So people hear it." Mina took the paper and read it quietly. Then she passed it to Silas. It was a statement of what happened, of who did it, of what it felt like to be a child no one believed. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even bitter. It was clear. Brave. "I want people to know," Tianita said, "even if he pretends none of it happened, even if they're scared to say his name." Silas folded the paper with care. "They'll know." And they would. The next day, Clara arranged a reading at the mission church on the hill. The same one where Victor had once stood tall among donors and ranchers, shaking hands with politicians and promising charity from his own poisoned cup. The room wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. Neighbors came, ranchers, two of the women who'd once tutted at Tianita for being too quiet. Miss Darlene, Thomas Ironwood. Even Jonas rode in from the ridge. Clara read the statement aloud. No names were changed. No blows softened. When she finished, the room stayed still. Then someone stood. Miss Darlene. She cleared her throat, eyes glassy. "I saw the bruises. I should have spoken sooner. I won't stay quiet again." Then Thomas. "I didn't want to get involved before, but I heard it. And I'll say it plain now, I was wrong to be silent." And one by one others stood. Some spoke, some didn't, but they stood. Outside wind tugged at the chapel's small bell. It rang once, sharp and clean. Tianita stepped out into the sunlight with the music box under her arm and the wind in her hair. Victor hadn't burned her name away. He'd only lit the fire that made it shine brighter. The scars didn't vanish. They just stopped being the end of the story. Spring came slow to Rimrock, the way it always did, first with wet wind, then with slushy ground, and finally with the stubborn crocus that poked up near the front steps, purple against the thaw. The snow had melted clean off the roofs, and the creek that cut through the eastern pasture ran high and quick, chattering like it had a story to tell. Tyanita sat beneath the cottonwood tree, her journal balanced on her knees, bare toes in the cool grass. The music box lay open beside her, the tune slow and sweet in the morning air. She didn't write every day, not anymore. But sometimes when the light came through the leaves just right, the words showed up on their own. Across the field, Silas worked with Benny on the new fence posts. The fire-damaged shed had been fully torn down, replaced with a sturdier one. They'd painted it the same red as the main barn, and Tyanita helped stain the edges, her fingers sticky with effort. Clara walked toward her now carrying a small stack of letters, some stamped official, others handwritten and folded neat. She stopped beside the tree, handed Tyanita one envelope in particular. "You got another one?" Tyanita raised her eyebrows. "From who?" Clara smiled. "Keep reading and find out." Inside was a note penned in careful block letters. "Miss Taya, I heard what you said at the church. My sister did too. I'm proud of you. We didn't speak up before, but you helped us find the words. Thank you." J.L. Tyanita ran her thumb across the page. "How many now?" she asked. Clara pulled a folded list from her pocket. 13 letters, 6 girls, 4 boys, 3 grown women who say they lived through the same silence. They're asking for help. Some just want to say they believe you. Tyanita stared out across the hills, wind catching her braid. "It still happened," she said quietly. "All of it." Clara nodded. "But now it's not just yours to carry." Inside the house, Mina was weaving again. She'd brought out the loom for the first time since winter and had started a new piece, warm threads of rust earth and deep blue woven tight and strong. When Tyanita walked past, she paused. "That one for someone?" she asked. Mina didn't look up. "It's for this house, for everything we lost and everything we found again." Tyanita reached out and touched the fabric. "It's beautiful." Mina gave a small, tired smile. "So are things that survive." That night they had guests. Jonas rode in with his wife and twin boys. Thomas Ironwood brought apple bread. Miss Darlene came with sweet preserves and a slow, unsure smile. Even Sheriff Mullins made an appearance, gruff and awkward, but holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he refused to explain. They gathered around the table, stories flowing like coffee, soft laughter rising into the rafters. Benny played cards with the twins. Clara argued gently with Jonas about fencing methods. Mina taught Miss Darlene how to braid cedar rings. Silas stepped out to the porch just before sunset, hands in his pockets, watching the sky bloom orange and pink over the hills. Tyanita followed, flute tucked beneath her arm. "Something on your mind?" he asked. She sat beside him. "Just thinking. About the night you found me. I don't remember what I said, or if I said anything at all." "You didn't," Silas said. "But you didn't have to." She was quiet for a while. The porch creaked beneath their boots. "I used to think that was the end," she said. "That night. That freezing. That was where the story stopped. And now," she looked up at the sky, "now I think it's where it started." Silas gave a small grunt. "Took me longer to figure that out when I was young." Tyanita turned to him. "What was your start?" He thought a long while. waking up alone, then finding folks who made me feel less so, like family. Exactly like that. She nodded slowly. I think I want to help those kids, she said. The ones writing me letters. You will, he said. You already are. She stood and brought the flute to her lips. The notes she played weren't sorrowful now. They bent and lifted, echoing against the trees and drifting toward the fields. Music like a signal fire, like a voice long buried now returned. Mina stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. Come in, child. Food's hot and Benny's threatening to tell stories about you. I'm coming. Tyanita lingered for one last breath of air, one more look at the land. The wind moved through the grass, not harsh, not angry, just steady. And in that moment, she understood something deep in her bones. The scars didn't vanish. They just stopped being the end of the story. They'd become the part where healing begins, and that she thought was more powerful than anything Victor had ever known.